What is up, Buck? I'm Doug with D&E in the Garage. Do me a favor. Tell me what comes to mind when I say Chevrolet Blazer. Are you picturing a 90s factory sleeper? Or maybe a modern CUV? Or an icon of the 1970s truck scene? Or even a 1980s Econobox? Confusingly, you would be correct on all fronts. Because the Chevrolet Blazer and its better dressed brother, the GMC Jimmy, have been serving around the globe for nearly 60 years. But unlike many automotive nameplates whose legacy and image solidify over time, you would be hard pressed to say exactly what a Chevy Blazer is without a specific model in front of you to reference. And that is what we're going to talk about today. Let's discuss one of the greatest trucks to ever roll off an American assembly line and all of the interesting and somewhat confusing twists and turns that its lineage has taken since 1969. Today, we do our best to honor the Chevrolet Blazer. Let's get into it. The Chevy Blazer lumbered onto the scene in 1969 as a direct response to vehicles like the International Scout, the Ford Bronco, and to a lesser extent, the Jeep CJ, which itself kicked off America's four-wheel drive craze after World War II. And because they were based off the existing line of GM trucks, the original Blazer and its nearly identical cohort, the 1970 GMC Jimmy, were cheaper for GM to produce than the Ford or International or even Jeep standalone models, and they offered a really rugged platform for off-road capability and general work truck stuff, because it was based on a work truck. While GM was late to the party, vehicles like the second generation Bronco, the Dodge Ram Charger, and the Jeep SJ Cherokee are a clear response to the popularity and success of the two-door SUV based on an existing vehicle platform that GM pioneered with the original Blazer and Jimmy. Now, the first generation of these trucks ran from 1969 to 1972 and was available with a straight six, either a 250 or a 292, or a V8. A 307 or 350. They were built in Flint, Michigan and St. Louis, Missouri, and because they were based off an existing truck line, they were able to offer more so-called luxury options, stuff like automatic transmissions, air conditionings. Additionally, they had a standard fully removable convertible hardtop, just like the Bronco, just like some of the Scouts, just like the CJs. Additionally, and kind of to the whole point, these trucks were available as two-wheel drive or four-wheel drive options. Now, the second generation came around in 1973 and it lasted until 1991. These are the Blazers you are likely familiar with. We call them the square bodies. More on that in a second. Now, because of the extremely long production run, 18 years, there were a ton of motors available for the second-gen Blazers and Jimmys. You could have a straight six, a 250. We lost the 292. Additionally, 305, 307, 350, and 400 V8s were used at various times. Not like you can get all these engine options every year, but over the 18 years, these engines were available. Additionally, there was a 6.2-liter Detroit diesel option, which was the same as the military spec Chevy trucks from that time, the ones with the 24-volt glow plug systems. Additionally, there was a military spec of the second generation Blazer designated the M1009. Now, the astute among you will note, 1973, that means this second gen Blazer is coming along just as the gas crisis is really getting good, and there's no better way to illustrate that than through a Popular Science article from 1973. They took a new second gen Blazer with the 175 horsepower 350, and they tested it 0 to 60 in 22.5 seconds, 9.6 miles per gallon at a sustained 45 miles per hour. Now, those numbers are particularly horrifying today. They were a little bit better back then, but it's safe to say the second generation Blazer was not quick. It was not overly powerful. It is a malaise era vehicle. But hey, bud, it makes up for all of that with attitude, size, and styling. Is there anything better than a 1970s American truck? I submit no. Now, something interesting about these trucks, we know these trucks as the square body Chevys, because when you look at them, they are the squarest thing you could possibly imagine. But interestingly, internally, GM knew this as the rounded line, because compared to the trucks that came before it, these were sleek, they were simplified, they were futuristic, and I guess they were rounded. I think that's pretty darn interesting. The whole world knows these as square body trucks GM calls them the rounded line. Now, obviously, over the course of an 18-year production run, these trucks did need to grow and adapt and evolve within the rounded line framework. Notable special editions and trim levels helped distinguish various years or options. Familiar names like Cheyenne, Scottsdale, Silverado, and Sierra were all used on the second-gen Blazers or Jimmys. In 1981, they received a relatively major front-end styling to upgrade from the 70s style grille and headlights to a much more 80s stacked headlight arrangement. Over the course of the 18-year production run, the standard engines were as follows. From 1973 to 1980, the Blazer and Jimmy came standard with a 250 cubic inch inline six. From 1981 to 1986, they used a high compression 305, and from 87 on, it was the throttle body injected 350. Additionally, that 6.2 liter Detroit diesel was available from 1982 to 1991. 1983 comes along, and both the Blazer and the Jimmy get the word full size added to the front of their name. Why? Because in 1983, GM started selling two other trucks, completely unrelated, also known as the Blazer and the Jimmy. We'll talk more about those in a minute, but first let's discuss the short-lived third generation of the Blazer. And yes, it is the third generation of the Blazer only. There is no third generation of the Jimmy, because the Jimmy name goes away in 1992. The third generation of the Blazer and the now Yukon are moved away from the rounded line onto the GMT 400 platform that the rest of the GM trucks of the day were already on. This goes on until 1994, when we lose the Blazer name as well. It is replaced by the Tahoe. So the Tahoe is the Blazer, the Yukon is the Jimmy. They didn't change the trucks, confusingly, they just changed the names. We're going to talk more about this confusing timeline lineage in a second, but first, let's time travel back to 1983 so that we can introduce the S10 Blazer and the S15 Jimmy. The guy who thought of names was on vacation this day, said, I don't know, we got Jimmy and Blazer badges, why don't we just use those? I'm sure it'll be fine. It's not going to be confusing to anyone. Not going to make doing a video history of the Blazer and Jimmy super confusing to research. Now, based on and co-developed with the S10 and S15 pickup trucks, the so-called Blazer S and Jimmy S had much smaller footprints and much smaller engine options than their full-size namesakes. While the pickups were designed and marketed to end GM's reliance on imported Isuzu trucks to fill the mini truck market, the SUVs were something new, something all their own. Though they retained the classic body-on-frame design and they used the same name as their full-size brothers, the smaller trucks were more in line with like a unibody Jeep XJ, which debuted in 1984. It was the new generation of SUVs. Smaller, a little bit more efficient, trade-off of size, maybe a little bit of performance for efficiency and on-road manners. The first generation of these so-called baby Blazers ran from 1983 to 1994 and was very much an 80s econobox to start. Your standard engine, 2.5 liter 4, along with a 2.8 liter V6, and later the 4.3 liter V6. You could even have a 2.2 liter Isuzu diesel option. Now, fans of the Cherokee XJ will recognize the GM 2.8 liter V6 as the same V6 that underpowered the XJ for the first few years of its existence until the 4 liter came around. As alluded to, these trucks were chronically underpowered until the 4.3 liter V6 came along in 1986. If you don't know, this is, in my opinion, one of the best V6 engines ever designed. It's basically a 350, less two cylinders, which kind of explains why it's such a great motor, because they've been developing the 350 for 50 years at this point. The two-door version of the baby Bronco S truck was sold until 1991, when it was joined by a four-door version made available for both Chevy and GM to sell. Additionally, GM's floundering Oldsmobile brand even got their own version of the S truck in the Bravada. It was very much in line with the GMC Jimmy for luxury, but it was even further upmarket. Additionally, it came standard with Smart Track all-wheel drive. Power to all four wheels at all times, achieved through a Borgs Warner 4472 transfer case. This is the same all-wheel drive system and transfer case available in the Safari trucks and the Astro vans of that time. Now, hands down, the most famous first generation baby Blazer or Jimmy, and possibly the most famous Blazer or Jimmy full stop, has to be the 1992 to 1993 GMC Typhoon. Everybody knows about this truck and its counterpart, the Cyclone, so I'm gonna do a glancing blow, but if y'all would like to see a deep dive video on the Typhoon and the Cyclone, leave me a comment down there in the squawk boxes. Basically, you have a stock Jimmy with every single thing changed. It's got body kits, it's got decals, it's got different wheels. That's just the easy stuff. You have a turbocharged 4.3 liter V6 with the entire rotating assembly upgraded, the entire ignition and electrical system upgrade. It's got dual throttle bodies off a 5.7 liter V8. It's got a 4L60 sending power to all four wheels through the aforementioned Borg's Warner 4472 all-wheel drive transfer case, which gives it a 0 to 60 in 5.3 seconds and a 14.1 second quarter mile. This is on an SUV in 1993. It was competitive with contemporaries like the Ferrari 348 and the Nissan's 300ZX Turbo. This truck and its pickup truck counterpart, the 91 to 92 Cyclone, are in the running for the fastest production trucks of all time. They were just gratuitous speed for the time. Think an SRT Grand Cherokee or Durango today. Just unnecessary, insane. Why does anybody need this? But thank God you made it. Second generation of the Baby Blazer S trucks ran from 1995 to 2005. The only option for an engine was the 4.3 liter Vortec, the fuel injected version of the 4.3, though if you were outside North America, you could still get a 2.2 liter Isuzu inline 4. Without naming competition from their full-size brother, both Blazer and Jimmy were free to use their names without any special designations, no prefixes, no suffixes. These trucks were reduced to only really being V6 four-wheel drive options. Technically, two-wheel drive was available as an option, but very few second-generation Blazer or Jimmys were sold as two-wheel drive models. That said, it's the special editions and different trim levels that really fill out the line and allowed Chevy and GMC to use these trucks to fit a bunch of different niches. Specifically, names like Envoy and Trailblazer started life as trim levels. Additionally, models like the Diamond Edition, the Extreme, and the ZR2 were all used on the second-gen Blazer and Jimmy. A lot of people may recognize the Extreme name from the S10. It was a street performance package for the S10, a response to the Ford Lightning. It was a super cool truck in the S10. In my opinion, even cooler in the Blazer, though my personal favorite GM truck from this time period is the ZR2 Blazer. It's the dedicated off-road version of the second generation S truck Blazer. What you're doing is you're starting with a two-door Blazer. You shorten the wheelbase and you actually expand the frame out. We're getting a wide body Blazer here. How cool is that? 3-inch wider ladder frame used. 3-inch lift over stock, 31 by 10s from the factory. In addition to the wider frame and the lift and the tires, the differentials, both front and rear, were beefed up with upgraded internals. You got Bilstein shocks and skid plates bumper to bumper. If you ever see one of these trucks, I highly recommend you pick it up. Now in 2002, while the second generation of the Baby Blazer and the Baby Jimmy were still in full effect, Chevrolet and GMC released the four-door unibody SUVs, the Trailblazer and the Envoy. While both had previously been trim levels of the Blazer and Jimmy, the Trailblazer and the Envoy would ultimately take their places. Now 2005 was the last model year for the Blazer, and I think I have an idea of how to explain all these overlapping time periods. There's something interesting in automotive history about 1995 and about 2005. If you study automotive history and models and you're just familiar with how cars came out and the years of different models, you'll notice a lot of times there's a new model for 95 and there was a new model for 05. That's because there were serious new regulations put in place each of those years, and it was way easier to design a new model than to retrofit your own model. Specifically in 1995, all vehicles had to have OBD2, and then in 2005 there was a whole new, much stricter set of safety and emission standards. And again, a lot of vehicles, this is what killed the 4-liter in the Grand Cherokee. This is what killed the WJ. Rather than make it applicable for 2005, they just killed everything from the old, started new. Same thing with the Blazer. In 95, rather than give the full-size Blazers OBD2, they killed them off. In 2005, rather than trying to bring the S trucks up to the new standards, they just killed them off. This is the end of the line for the Blazer. Served for 34 years in a number of iterations, and it can now rest knowing full well that its place as an icon of American trucks and an icon of GM's adaptability, secure and cemented into history. Rest now, old friend, for a bit. Because after a 14-year hiatus, the Blazer name returns to GM showrooms. Allow me to introduce the Blazer crossover. The 2019 Blazer is a compact CUV introduced by GM to slot in between the compact Equinox and the 3-row Traverse. Engine choices for the new vehicle were a 2.5 liter inline 4 or a 3.6 liter V6. In 2020, a 2 liter turbo became available for the new Blazer. Prospective buyers could additionally get this vehicle in 4-wheel or front-wheel drive. And that is about all that I can really say about this vehicle. Despite backlash and utter disgust from both the bowtie faithful and fans of classic American trucks, the 2019 Blazer crossover sold extremely well, and it continues to sell extremely well today. In 2023, it got a facelift, and would you believe that it's not alone living under the name Chevy Blazer right now? They did it again. Okay, let's talk about it. 2023, we get the Blazer EV. Thankfully, this time that we have two parallel running Blazers, at least they're on the same platform and bodied the same. Sold for the 2023 model year, the Chevrolet Blazer EV is Chevy's most recent attempt to capture the small EV car market. Previous EV and hybrid offerings from Chevy have actually made them one of the front runners in the North American EV market. If you want a luxury EV, I don't know, you buy a Tesla, you buy a Rivian, you buy one of the pickup trucks. If you want a commuter EV, a budget EV, you buy a Toyota or a Chevy. Those are the names that people trust for EVs in the United States. And boy, is GM leaning into this thing hard. It actually served as the very first fully electric NASCAR pace car just a few weeks ago in February 2025, and GM is currently using the Blazer EV platform to develop their next generation fully electric NASCAR EV. I actually have a whole video on the Blazer EV and its place in NASCAR and some other things with NASCAR going towards EV. I'm not gonna lie to you people, actually, it's probably the video that I put out recently that did the worst. I don't know if I've screwed up the thumbnail or if I made a bad joke in the first 30 seconds y'all didn't like, but I'm gonna link that. If you have any interest at all in the Blazer EV or NASCAR going electric, go take a look at it and leave me a comment down in the squawk box. If you hate it, please tell me why so that I can understand and not put that much work into a video that's gonna get no views again. I'm not being sassy here. I really appreciate all feedback. You tell me what you wanna see, that's what I'm gonna make. And that brings us to today, people. If you examine history of the Blazer and its better dressed brother, Jimmy, and you avoid elevating any one brand up above another, the picture you get is of a vehicle, not of a truck, not of an SUV, not of a crossover or an EV, just a vehicle designed for the needs of the average people. Much like the Cherokee nameplate is for Jeep, Blazer is whatever the world needs it to be in that moment. And in that, it remains relevant in ways that others cannot. Unlike vehicles like, say, the Jeep Wrangler, the Mazda Miata, or the Volkswagen Beetle, which have an identity that transcends time and is adverse to change, the Blazer's identity is in its adaptability at this point. I can tell you, I was walking around the 2018 New York International Auto Show, and I didn't know that this Blazer existed. And I rolled through the Chevy section and I caught this thing and I was disgusted. I'm gonna include the footage at the end of this video if I can find it, because I think I made a YouTube video about my experience there. But Eric and I rolled up on it and we were like, what? Our response was visceral. We hated it. We were disgusted. And the reason is we were brought up on baby Blazers and would probably give our left for any single year or iteration of the full-sizers. Like most car guys, we run and make a lot of our decisions purely based on nostalgia, purely based on a feeling. But unlike vehicles like the Wrangler, the Miata, or even the Beetle, the Blazer does not need to capitalize on the power of nostalgia to reach its target audience. It can take any form and sell well, and honestly, it has, evidenced by going from a full-size, full-frame 400 CCU V8 to a 2-liter turbo crossover in 2025. Its ability to adapt to any landscape transcends its own name and identity. What GM seems to know that others do not, diehard fans of 70s and 80s trucks are rarely the target market for new cars. Build whatever you want, capitalize on a popular name, dodge the hate, collect the cash. I wouldn't be surprised if that's on a banner somewhere in the halls of GM, or certainly in the Blazer department. That's all there is on this one, folks. The Blazer's history is long and winding and confusing and a little heartbreaking because there's such a variation between a 1973 second gen and a Blazer EV today. How do you even rectify those two when vehicles like the Bronco and the Wrangler are getting throwbacks, stuff that look more like the vehicles we loved from the past? But the truth is, the legacy of the Blazer is as an adaptable vehicle. It seems to reincarnate itself every 15 to 20 years for the next generation's needs. And I personally find it easier to take when you look at it like that. It is an American vehicle. I hope the Blazer name is still around in another 50 years or 100 years. I'll probably hate what they're putting it on, but hey, at least it'll be around. At least we're keeping that history alive. So let me know down in the squawk boxes. What do y'all think about the Blazer and the Jimmy? If you could have one, which one would it be? Are you on board with GM just continuing to recycle the Blazer and Jimmy names over and over again? Or would you have rather see them find new names every time they drastically changed the style of the vehicle? I wasn't around in '83 when they introduced the baby Blazers, but I have to assume full-size Blazer and Jimmy fans had to be pissed. I mean, pissed. So leave me that comment down there in the squawk boxes if you like the video. Like the video, that's common sense. Subscribe to the channel. Maybe go check out my website, monkeywiththetoolbox.com. Thank you so much for watching. I cannot wait to see y'all on the next one. Real quick, I want to plug Eric's new channel, Every Man Garage. I will link that down below so that you can subscribe that, because a ton of you ask me all the time, hey, where's Eric? There's your answer. He's on Every Man Garage. Go subscribe to him. Thank you so much for watching. I cannot wait to see y'all on the next one.